Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the next in our CCS Talks series of webinars, Europe's Next CCS Facilities. My name is Jamie Burrows, and I'm Client Engagement Manager at the Global CCS Institute. For those of you who are not familiar with the Institute is an international think tank focused on accelerating the deployment of CCS around the world. We have offices in Melbourne, Tokyo, Beijing, Brussels, London, and Washington, DC. Before we get started, a few words on housekeeping. You can adjust the view within our GoToWebinar platform using the icons at the top of your screen. Today's webinar will last roughly 1 hour. Towards the end of the session, I will be putting your questions towards our speakers. If you'd like to submit a question, you can do so using the questions panel there on your screen. We will be recording today's webinar and making a copy of the webinar available through our website in the coming days. Well, today I'm delighted to be joined by Trude Sundset and Mark Driessen. Trude is the CEO of Gassnova, the Norwegian state enterprise responsible for the development of carbon capture and storage, and also the body which is coordinating the full-scale project in Norway. Trude began her career as a researcher at Sundset before moving to Statoil, now Equinor. In her 19 years at Statoil, Trude held a variety of senior positions, including Chief Researcher and Vice President, Environment and Climate. Mark Driessen is Manager Public Affairs for the Porthos project at the Port of Rotterdam. Mark has responsibility for stakeholder engagement and communications. Previously, Mark worked for the Dutch government in the energy division of the Ministry of Economic Affairs. Okay, some background to today's webinar. So, Europe has now made a net zero commitment, and there is growing recognition that CCS will be essential, not only to tackle emissions from hard to abate sectors, but also to enable clean hydrogen production and carbon dioxide removal from the atmosphere. The title of our webinar today is Europe's Next CCS Facilities. Today, we have two large-scale facilities in operation in Europe, Sleipner and Snøhvit, both in Norway, both operated by Equinor. There are more than 10 large-scale projects in development in the background in Europe at this time, and a number of other projects in the early planning stages. The projects that we will discuss today are among the most mature in Europe, and it's very likely that they will become the next to be operational in Europe. They're not only important for regional decarbonisation, but also groundbreaking, adopting novel approaches that may transform the way that we deliver CCS elsewhere in the world. So let's kick off with the full-scale project, and I'll hand across to Trude initially to provide an overview for you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this important webinar. I have the pleasure of heading Gassnova, and we coordinate Norway's full-scale project for carbon capture and storage on behalf of the Norwegian government. If you could take the next slide, please. So as you mentioned, Norway has 24 years of experience from effective carbon capture and safe storage in the North Sea. And for the past 5 years, we have worked together with Fortum Oslo Varme's waste to energy plant in Oslo and with Heidelberg Norcem cement factory in Brevik to mature 2 full-scale industrial onshore CO2 capture projects. In addition, we are utilizing our offshore storage expertise through the Northern Lights Consortium consisting of Equinor with partners Shell and Total. And the plan is to build an open access transport and storage infrastructure for CO2. So for us, full-scale CCS is about the entire value chain from capturing CO2 to transporting it and finally storing it. If you take the next slide. If built as planned, the 2 full-scale plants will be able to capture a total of 800,000 tons of CO2 annually. The Fortum plant will be among the first in the world to capture large amounts of CO2 from a waste to energy plant, And this project is important also for the city of Oslo to meet its ambitious climate targets and can contribute experience to 450 waste to energy plants throughout Europe. And Heidelberg Cement, Norcem, could actually be the first cement factory in the world to capture CO2. And this will be a very important contribution to the cement industry, which represents 5 to 7% CO2 of all CO2 emissions globally. If you can take the next slide, please. In Norway, we will be able to use people and skills developed in the petroleum sector in new ways. And we believe that in the future, CCS could become an entirely new industry. So our project alone will generate interesting jobs for some 4,000 people. But we do not see our project as just a Norwegian project. We believe this is a European project. In fact, the storage facility in the North Sea will have room for CO2 from all across Europe. So we are, in fact, we have a lot of overcapacity in that storage that we're planning. So as such, it represents an opportunity for many European-based companies and industries looking for ways to meet their emission reduction targets. If you can take the next slide, please. The Norwegian full-scale CCS project is a cooperation between the Norwegian government and companies in the private sector. As many of you may be aware, the Norwegian state plays a significant and active role, not only in governing, but also contributing to business development in Norway, either as an owner, a lender, or contributor of seed capital to green or tech startups. And the Norwegian state is a large, long-term and active owner of some of Norway's largest corporations, even those listed on the Oslo Stock Exchange, and particularly among companies basing their business on exploring Norway's natural resources, Equinor being one of them. So when the Norwegian state began looking for industrial partners for our onshore CO2 capture projects, it made sense to team up with companies whose production is critical to societal development. Industries with large CO2 emissions that must be reduced, either to meet imposed or self-imposed reduction targets, or simply because the price of CO2 eventually will become so expensive that they have no choice. And the technology, the processes, and the learnings from the demonstration project will be of use to industries way beyond Norway. And sharing our experiences and learnings is an important part of the mandate given to us by the Norwegian Ministry of Petroleum and Energy. And we think that together with our industrial partners, we have come a long way. And earlier this year, we together delivered solid documentation to the Norwegian government. This documentation will provide the basis for the government's investment proposal scheduled for this fall. If you could take the next slide, please. As expected, cost concerns are high on everyone's agenda in government as well as in businesses. And in particular, costs related to CCS and CCUS as compared to other climate initiatives. And the combined effects of the corona crisis and oil price decline, especially for the Norwegian economy, could impact ambitions and plans in ways that we had not foreseen and could not foresee just a few months ago. Nevertheless, I have actually become increasingly optimistic. What we see on this slide is how we foresee the cost development of CCS from the perspective of investors as well as the Norwegian environmental authorities. And the cost curves improve significantly with maximized use of every part of our value chain and with increasing numbers of CCS projects. And we will continue to focus on reducing technology costs through research and development facilitated by our research program called CLIMIT, and through the tests that we will perform at our technology center at Mongstad. If you can take the next slide, please. I'm pleased to say that the sentiment towards CCS has become increasingly positive during the last year, both in Norway but also globally. And most recently, the European Commission stated that CCS will be among the technologies to get funding from the 150 billion euro initiative set up to ensure a green transformation of European industry. Next slide, please. Following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Norwegian government and parliament have been looking for ways to keep the wheels of society turning. Suddenly, and fortunately for us, CCS is seen as a counter-cyclical project, part of the solution to generate jobs and stimulate innovation. In addition, of course, to being an important climate initiative and catalyst for industrial transformation. Next and last slide, please. Previously, CCS has unified a Europe divided by climate change. And CCS can be a bridge between those who believe that the situation calls for an acceleration of green transformation and those who believe that costly climate initiatives should be put on hold in order to prioritize immediate life support to ailing businesses. So it's a bridge over troubled water. Now I think that's a pretty good position to be in. Thank you very much. I look forward to answering your questions.
Excellent. Well, Trude, thank you very much for your overview of the full-scale project. A few questions for you initially, and then we'll discuss the Porthos project. So, Trude, can you explain how the full-scale project relates to Northern Lights?
Yes, as I mentioned, Northern Lights is the transportation and storage part of what we call the full-scale demonstration project in Norway. So when we talk about the full-scale project, it's also the capture plants that we're planning for, the cement factory and the waste-to-energy factory. And then we'll send it through the transportation and storage part, which is called the Northern Lights.
Excellent, thank you. The full-scale project is the first CCS project in the world that plans to transport CO2 using ships. Can you tell us a little more about why this method has been selected?
Well, it's a part of optimizing this as a demonstration. We want to prove that you can put all this together in a value chain. And to use ships is increasing flexibility, so you can then transport CO2 from, for instance, a port in elsewhere in Europe, as well as different ports in Norway. But we also have an intermediate storage as a part of our project, and we are also building a pipeline to the storage site in the North Sea. So it's a combination, and you have to optimize if you expand on this value chain, obviously. But using ships is something that we are familiar with, and also we think it adds flexibility to our demonstration project.
Great. Trude, are you finding that other projects around the world are expressing interest in adopting a similar approach to transport and storage?
Absolutely. We do see an increased interest, and we see interest in maybe copying parts of it, and we are, as I said, we have the mandate to share experiences, and we put a lot of effort into trying to reach out and to cooperate. So I think that hopefully we can inspire and cooperate with other projects. That's our aim, at least.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Well, Trude, you touched on it in your overview there. Since the start of the year, we've seen a global pandemic, and it's widely expected that many countries will see recession. How has that impacted the project?
Of course, we can. It is challenging when you have both the pandemic and a drop in the oil price, a significant drop in oil price. But fortunately, we have responsible politicians that see this as an opportunity and to look at it as a counter-cyclical project where you need to create some new momentum, and why not at the same time also look for green transformation of the industry. So I think we have been fortunate since our project is kind of ready to go. Everything is done in the industrial way, so we're ready for the investment decision. And that made it easier, of course, when looking for how to start the wheels turning again in the society. This came up as the kind of doing 3 things at the same time. You do a project, you create jobs and value creation, and then you do the green transformation at the same time. So we're very fortunate in that way, I think.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Trude, the Northern Lights partners have indicated their commitment to move ahead with the transport and storage element of the project, subject to government approval. What are the next steps in that approval process for the full-scale project?
We just this week actually had also approval decisions from our industrial partners Fortum and Heidelberg-Cement. So they have all now sanctioned the project and just awaiting the decision from the government and the parliament. And we have to invest a lot of money, and a lot of the funding needs to come from the government. So these are really exciting times. We're talking about significant investment at the same time as we have engaged and interested industries that really want to do this. That is a prerequisite to make the decision. But the timing is so that it will be a part of the regular budget proposal for 2021. And that starts just in August to plan for. And then October 7th is when the government will hand over the budget proposal to the parliament. And depending on what's in there, we could know that. Otherwise, we'll have to wait to the end of the year to wait for the Parliament's decision.
So these are incredibly exciting times for the full-scale project. If everything goes well, when could construction begin?
It could begin January 1st, 2021. So just around the corner, we think. We've been working with this project for 5 years, so we're just ready to go.
Excellent. And then when would you expect the facility to be operational?
The plan is in 2024. That's when we can start operation of the whole project. Both the capture plants and this transportation and storage will be ready to kick off in 2024.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Trude, we hear a lot about public support for CCS in Norway. We know that youth organizations, labor unions, bodies representing enterprise have all spoken out about the need for CCS in industrial applications. Why do you think CCS has widespread support there in Norway?
Well, first of all, I just want to express how grateful I am for all this support. It's really inspiring and very, very important for us that we receive all this support. I don't know exactly why, but for one, we have 24 years of experience. So we have done it. We have proven that it works. We know we can do it. We have the expertise. And we have invested a lot in research and development and in our state enterprise. So I think that people are trusting that we know what we are doing and that we can also do it again and to share this experience with the rest of the world. So I think this is something that the Norwegian people trust. And then I also think that we have a long tradition for this close cooperation between the government and the industry. So there's a lot of trust in our country. And on top of that, I think also people believe in new technologies. So we are a country that relies on developing new technologies and to try to take our society into the future. But again, very pleased that we get that kind of support.
Excellent. And Trude, what do you think other European countries can do to build public support for what will become a really important technology for decarbonisation?
I hope that maybe we can help out to talk about what we're doing, like we're doing today. And we're pleased to show everything that we're doing in our project. So in the contracts with the industry, they are obliged to talk about their project and to receive visitors and to really talk about what they're doing. And they are doing this in an excellent way, the way I see it. They are so good at sharing their experiences. And I think the minute we have this in operation and we can prove it works, I hope that that is something that also other countries will accept and try to copy it or to do their things maybe in a different way, but still talk about what they're doing and to take it out to the public as well. I think that's important. But I don't think there's a quick fix. We have to make sure that things are safe and that it works. And so I guess we have to be a bit patient about that as well.
Absolutely. Excellent. Well, Trude, thank you very much. Let's now move across to Mark and the Porthos project. So perhaps, Mark, if I can ask you initially to provide a short overview of the Porthos project, please.
Well, thanks very much, Jamie, and hello to everyone attending this webinar. Hope you can hear and see me well. My pleasure to tell you very shortly about this, well, very ambitious and quite challenging, but I believe in the end just utterly necessary project called Porthos. Porthos actually is an acronym for Port of Rotterdam Transport Hub and Offshore Storage, for those of you who are interested in acronyms. And well, actually, you're also witnessing the public launch of our brand new corporate identity today, including our own logo, which I believe is a good indication of the progress we're making as a project. So that's just nice to know. The next slide, please. First, very shortly, a little bit about the Dutch context, the Dutch situation. Here you see the reduction, the CO2 reduction targets for the Netherlands: 49% reduction in 2030, 95% reduction in 2050. The 2030 goal of 49% reduction has been laid down in a national climate agreement, which was negotiated by hundreds of parties. So it's a broad agreement. It covers all sorts of sectors: housing, transport, agriculture, also industry. And the interesting thing and the good thing, we believe, is that for industry, 50% of their reduction target has to be met by CCS. And everything in the climate agreement, or almost everything, is now being incorporated into government policy. And next slide, please. Then if you zoom in to Rotterdam, and more specifically to the Port of Rotterdam area, Rotterdam truly is an ideal location for CCS. And there are 5 elements which I want to mention why it is so ideal. Firstly, we have a huge amount of emissions. Almost 17% of the national Dutch CO2 emissions is located in our port area. And that's about 26 megatons per year. And even though it's a huge port from a CCS perspective, this industry is located on quite relatively small area. It's 40 kilometers in length. It's a very lengthy port. So they're close together. They're also connected already on through several infrastructural projects. There are world-class companies in our area who are willing to invest in the energy transition as well, and willing to invest in CCS. And fourthly, and very importantly, we have empty gas fields which provide storage capacity right on our doorstep. Well, relatively right on our doorstep. I'll show you a bit more later. Only in the Dutch area, and I know for the Norwegian area it's even more, but only in the Dutch area we have about 1,600 megatons of storage capacity potentially available. So there's storage potential enough. And last but not least, the infrastructure we are wanting to build or trying to build is very relevant also in combination with other developments in the port, where a lot of work has been done: hydrogen production, use of CO2, circular economy ideas. So altogether, we should be able to have a successful CCS project in Rotterdam. Next slide, please. Then what is the project that we are building? I hope you get the overview in a second. I'm not seeing it yet. Yes, there it is. This is an overview of our project. It consists of 4 elements. We are trying to build an independent, open access transport and storage infrastructure for CO2. So we separated the capture from the transport and storage infrastructure. Industry is responsible for the capture. We are responsible for the transport and storage. It has 4 elements: an onshore pipeline right through the port area of about 33 kilometers in length that ends up at a compressor station where the CO2 will be put on a high pressure, then pumped into an offshore pipeline. That's the 3rd element, and ending up at an existing platform, gas platform, and gas field called the P18 platform. So that's actually an element we are reusing, the existing platform, which is still in work or still working, and it will be finished, or the gas field will be empty by the time we need it. Next slide, please, Jamie. The project is being developed by 3 Dutch state-owned parties, EBN, Gassnova, and the Port of Rotterdam Authority. So they are responsible for the transport and storage infrastructure. We have 4 potential customers: Air Liquide, Air Products, 2 hydrogen companies, and ExxonMobil and Shell, 2 refineries. And they are needed to get this up and running and to get enough volume of CO2 to get a project. They will deliver, if it all goes well, they will deliver 2.5 megatons CO2 per year for 15 years. And then in 15 years, we will have the gas field completely stored, because we estimated at about 37 megatons of storage capacity. Well, it's an investment about between 400 and 500 million, and we're planning to be operational by the end of 2023. Next, please, Jamie. Then this seemingly very simple picture, well, is not so simple. And there lies a world of challenges behind this, well, what we call public-private partnership. The fact that we separated capture from transport and storage, a lot of people believe it's a good idea. We do. But to get it up and running, it gives you a lot of chicken and egg questions, as we call them. And the most simple, I will only name one, is we have the private companies who have to invest in the capture, but they will only invest in capture if they are sure that we will build the transport and storage infrastructure. Again, on the other side, we can only decide to invest in the transport and storage infrastructure if we are sure that they will provide the CO2. So we have sort of a, we call it a funnel process, where we steadily make more and more agreements with the private companies who have to provide the CO2, mutual commitments, of course, and we keep on investing, they keep on progressing. And then you have the third element, the public authorities, who have to provide the right regulation, also the funding. We are already being funded by the EU, which we are very happy about, but the Dutch government has also to provide some funding. So this is a world of issues behind this well, cooperation between 3 different institutions, let's call that. Next and last one, I believe. Yeah, just to round up the status and the planning, what we'll do in 2020, and working towards final investment decision in 2021. We are hoping to close contracts with our industrial clients in 2020. That's a very, very important step, of course. The fact that we cannot take FID before 2021 lies, well, actually almost solely in the lengthy permitting procedures that we have to go through. And then as soon as we have FID, we'll start building the system. It takes about 2 years, and will hopefully be end of 2023, could be 2024 at the beginning. We want to be operational. And then the last slide just says, thank you for your attention. And please visit our brand new website.
Excellent. Well, Mark, thank you very much for your overview of the Porthos project. Exciting times. It sounds like we're not so far away from seeing a CCS project there in Rotterdam. A few questions for you. So has the global pandemic and subsequent economic impact affected the project at all?
No. Not at all, and actually it seems to have even given sort of a stronger drive for everyone involved to work as hard as we can to make this project a success. Of course, we know as 3 state-owned companies, we are fully committed. We have, of course, checked with our potential customers what the effect is on their work, and they're all still committed to our processes. So far, if anything, it seems to have a positive effect on the project.
Excellent. Well, it's great to hear that both the full-scale project in Norway and Porthos there in Rotterdam seem to be largely unaffected by coronavirus and the economic impact at this stage, at least. Mark, we've been hearing about the SDE++ scheme that's being introduced there in the Netherlands. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that will support CCS deployment there?
Yeah, sure. Actually, for the first time in history, and this is one of the most crucial elements of our project. The Dutch government is putting a subsidy scheme in place, which includes CCS. They are expanding an existing subsidy scheme for renewable energy with technologies aimed at CO2 reduction, including CCS. And so that's the first time that industry can actually apply for CCS funding on a national level. The EU has some mechanisms in place, or had some mechanisms in place even earlier. And what the subsidy scheme does, or at least aims to do, is close the gap between the ETS price and the total cost of CCS, because the total cost of CCS are still higher than the current ETS price. I will not dive into it too deep, but it's a competition on costs. So the cheapest technology wins or comes first. Let's say they have a total budget, you can apply, the cheapest comes first, then the second cheapest, then third cheapest, until the whole budget is gone, of course. So there's no certainty, there's no specific CCS budget in there. There's no certainty that CCS will get through the applications or get through the subsidy scheme, but we are very confident that it will succeed. However, there's another interesting aspect, is that all 4 of our potential customers have to apply individually. They all have different costs for capture. They cannot apply together, and all of them have to be successful. If one of them fails, we have quite a big problem, I have to be honest. But then again, we're trying, of course, to mitigate that risk. And I believe that this subsidy scheme just provides an excellent and a golden chance for industry to close the business case for CCS.
Excellent. So what are the remaining steps to finalize that scheme, and what does the application process, what's the timescale involved in that application process?
Yeah, well, we're waiting the definitive publication of the regulations, which can happen any day now by the ministry, and then they will open up the first call this autumn. So it will be quite exciting autumn for our project, I believe, because if we get through it, we have taken a huge step in our project.
Absolutely. It sounds like it will be an exciting autumn for CCS in Europe on the whole.
Yeah, I believe so, yeah.
Excellent. So, Mark, EU recovery plans are currently being developed, and it's expected that energy transition will feature prominently within those. As part of those recovery plans, do you anticipate any additional support being provided to the Porthos project? And were that the case, what form would that support take?
Yeah, well, I will not believe that there will be anything specifically for Porthos in there. I hope that CCS will be part of the recovery plans of the EU or national recovery plans, or any recovery plan that's being put out. I believe, well, of course, everyone is looking for funding, but maybe for now, for me, it's more important that by including CCS into recovery plans, it gets more and more clear that institutions such as the EU underline the necessity of CCS. And I believe that something that's still missing in the whole CCS debate is politicians, ministers, commissioners at the EU to openly speak up about the necessity of CCS. I think everybody's still very reluctant to speak out on CCS, in the Netherlands especially, and that's something that's still missing. So I hope by including CCS in these recovery plans and in energy transition plans, it gets more and more of a given, a fact that CCS will be needed as part of a whole mix of technologies to reach our climate targets.
Absolutely. Excellent. So, Mark, how long has it taken the Porthos project to get to its current position? And why is it important for this project to move ahead as soon as possible?
Yeah, well, we've been working on the project now, and I was involved from the very start for 3 years, started in the summer of 2017. And well, actually, the importance for me is quite simple. There's no more time to waste. Think about the carbon budget. Every ton of CO2 going up in the air is a ton too much, or a ton too many. I don't know how you say it in English. And I believe we have the right momentum, especially now, as I just explained, with the Dutch subsidy scheme in place. And we shouldn't miss this momentum. And well, also let's say last but not least, I mean, there's been so much talk on CCS, so much debate, but the one thing that's lacking in Europe is projects, apart of course from the 2 existing ones in Norway. So we need projects to really show and indicate that CCS is viable and necessary and works at CO2 reduction.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mark, I understand that there are hopes that the project could eventually expand and connect up with some other ports. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, what I just presented to everyone was the current scope of Porthos. That is what we are developing right now. However, at the same time, we are also investigating the possibility of future, well, let's say, expansion or growth of the system. And together with our 2 competitors, the Port of Antwerp and North Sea Port, we developed a plan to sort of together explore ways to physically connect the 3 ports for CO2 connection infrastructure. And the 3 port areas are very comparable in the sense that all 3 of them are huge industrial areas with high emissions and actually face the same challenges. As I said, we are fierce competitors, but we believe that the energy transition is not something that we compete on, that we could actually well, better work together than be competitors. And we applied for what's called a project of common interest status at the European Union, and that was granted earlier this year. And so we will slowly explore together how we can connect these ports, but also the other 2 ports have to first well, check do their own feasibility studies about CCS in their area. So it's a long way to go to connect them, but we believe that we are onto something that could be very interesting to well, in the end realize. But let me emphasize just it's a sort of a separate part of Porthos, and it needs separate decision making. So what we're working towards now, FID, is for what I just presented.
Okay, so a wider network connecting those different ports would be quite an undertaking. What sort of policy support might be needed in the background?
Oh yeah, I think there are some European issues to be tackled for shipping of CO2, for example, cross-border issues with liability, for example, of stored CO2. But I believe also that other countries, if we want to store CO2 from Belgium, or also Germany, have shown an interest in the Porthos project. If they want to store CO2 through the Porthos system, then I believe their national governments, so the Belgian government, the German government, also have to put in the right incentives on their national level, because of course the Netherlands subsidy scheme is only available for Dutch parties.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Mark. I think now we'll turn to questions from the audience. So you can still submit questions through the GoToWebinar control panel. So let me just pick out our first question here. First question that's come up is regarding collaboration with other CCS projects, and specifically how projects are collaborating together. So I'll ask that question to Trude initially, and then Mark, ask you to comment on that afterwards.
Well, we try our best to cooperate and to share knowledge, and we do that through a lot of different platforms, and we use our websites, we go to conferences, we have meetings, and we have a lot of visitors coming to Norway from different countries, sometimes from authorities in other countries, and sometimes from industry that are interested. And then we have a lot of collaboration on technology development, which I think is really key. So we are a part of this ACT program in Europe, and we can also support research and demonstration in projects in other countries, as long as it creates some value in Norway. So I think through those active engagement in participating in joint projects is very important. And we should probably do more. So I'm looking forward to in the future to share even more of what we're doing and to learn from others.
Okay, and
Yeah,
Mark, anything to add?
Fully agree with what Trude is saying, and what we notice is there are also some other projects in development, even in the Netherlands, which the Netherlands is quite a small country, so you get, of course, you look into cooperation and collaborating together. But where I also noticed that you need full focus on your project to get this done, to get the project done, and so we have decided to be quite strict in freezing our scope for the moment and not be too distracted by what other projects are doing, because we need to build this infrastructure. And of course, we want to share knowledge and we want to be open to everyone who wants to talk to us. But it's a lot of hard work to get this project done. And we'll start, but I'm sure we'll start collaborating more and more as the years progress.
So, and I also would like to add, since we're planning to build an infrastructure, so we are inviting other industries and from other European countries to send their CO2 to our transport and storage facilities. That will be the real cooperation, I think, if that happens.
Excellent, excellent. The next question that is here, are there not current legal challenges to the seaborne transportation of CO2 for cross-border storage? And Trude, I'll ask you to respond to that question initially.
Yes, it's a very good question, and I'm pleased to say that I think it was in October it was agreed that you could that was legal. So the London Protocol, the amendment hasn't been fully validated yet, but I think it was Norway and Netherlands that really pushed through an agreement so that it is legal. But you also have to have an agreement between two countries to transport the CO2 from one country to the other. So if the willingness is there, it is fully possible to do it today.
Excellent, excellent. And Mark, anything to add on that question?
No. Perfectly.
Excellent. Great, thank you, Trude. The next question here relates to Germany. What would you say to the German government to convince them that CCS is both safe and essential to decarbonize industry and for hydrogen production? And well, I'll ask Mark to respond to that initially.
Well, we or at least also I know the Port of Rotterdam and even the Dutch government is intensifying the contact with the German government, also on cross-border infrastructure, and it's not just CCS, it's also hydrogen. And we notice a very clear movement in the German government where CCS is back on the agenda. What we would say is look at all the research that's being done, look at your industry and the alternatives that are not yet there to decarbonize them. And I know in Germany the cement industry is quite vocal for the necessity of CCS. But we have, as Porthos, if we talk to the German companies or German government, we have very good conversations, and they seem to be more and more open to CCS. But and of course, show them also the possibility of using Porthos as an infrastructure, and the same will probably go for Trude.
Yeah, sure. We actually organized a big European CCS conference in Oslo, September 5th last year. And we had a lot of European speakers and some of them from Germany. And we had a representative from WWF in Germany who spoke very positively on the possibility for CCS. So I think we're getting there. And I hope it helps that we focus on industry emissions. So it's emissions from industries that don't really have a choice. They cannot just switch to renewables because the CO2 is produced in the production process. And those industries amount to 25% of global emissions. So we have to solve it. So there's no alternative. I hope that when we show that that's what we're actually doing, I hope that that will convince a lot of people that this is necessary, and also that through our experience from storing CO2 from almost 25 years, that this is a safe solution. And we're happy to receive the CO2 emissions from Germany. Hope that helps as well.
Absolutely. Excellent. Trude, I have a question here specifically for you. Trude mentioned there is research ongoing on CCS. For which aspects?
We have a very broad research portfolio. I think we have supported more than 500 projects in research and demonstration. And it's on capture, it's on transportation, it's on storage, and it's also environmental consequences of using amine capturing CO2, for instance. And then we have a lot of hybrid, how to put up a value chain, all these smart things that people come up with, and how to optimize the value chain. So we have a big portfolio of research issues that we are pursuing. That's very important.
Excellent, excellent. And the next question I think is for both of you, and it's just regarding the use of CO2 utilization in each of the projects. Can you perhaps speak a little about that? Mark, I'll let you start with that question.
Yeah, well, for us, we try to be very clear. We are building a transport and storage infrastructure. That's what Porthos is. And you can transport it, of course, to storage. But if you want to transport your CO2 to somewhere else where it can be used, we're more than happy to do that. But we as Porthos are not the developers of utilization projects. So other companies are doing that, and they can come to us with questions with demand for CO2 or supply of CO2, and we'll be more than happy to transport it to anywhere. So that's actually my answer. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I believe it's it's a lot of interesting synergies, particularly on the capture side. So developing new capture technologies would make use in CCU as well as CCS. So I think that we don't really distinguish between how you're using the CO2. Again, the same with Porthos. We are setting up an infrastructure for transportation and geologic storage. That is because that's what we know how to do in Norway, and we are very concerned being government owned. It's about helping the climate, and we know that the majority of CO2 capture needs to be go to final storage. But that doesn't mean that you could find good projects and good products also for use of CO2. So those should work side by side. But if you look at the numbers, the majority needs to go to storage, actually, if we look towards 2050 and to reach Paris Agreement goals.
Absolutely, and I think that aligns with the Institute's findings as well. When we look at the size of the markets for utilization, they can make a contribution, but ultimately we need to look at large-scale storage to really make a significant impact. The next question here relates to the capture technology that is proposed for the different capture sites. Could you perhaps say a little bit about the capture technologies that are proposed for the various capture sites involved in your projects? And Trude, I'll let you respond to that question initially.
We're using, there are different technologies, but they are both amine absorption of CO2. It's important for us when we are setting up this demonstration project, which is complex, to do all this at the same time and to make it work at the same time. So, and these are commercial industries, and the capacities we're talking about is of commercial industrial scale. So we need to have as low risk as possible on the technology side. So it's commercially available technology, which is most of it is amine technology out there, but we certainly are very interested in seeing how we can improve and to reduce costs from that technology. And then, of course, also looking at new, the next commercial technologies that will be there if we are able. And that's what we want to do, to create a market for CCS. We definitely will see a lot of new technologies. And we are just developing our technology center at Mongstad to support tests of other types of technology, like membranes, for instance.
Okay, and Mark?
Well, having separated capture from transport and storage, I'm not a capture expert. What I do know, however, is that our customers are capturing what's called the pre-combustion CO2. So it's the cheaper, the more pure CO2 to capture. and that will be the place, the logical place, of course, to start with, because simply it's cheaper. But I'm not into the capture technology, so you should ask the industry.
Okay, no problem.
What's really interesting, I think, is as we move ahead and this becomes a big market, I think also we'll see that process industries like aluminum and ferrosilicium and cement, they probably will develop new technologies where this is integrated, where you recycle and you get more higher, like you said, higher percentage of CO2 in your waste stream. So I think there's a lot to gain from in the future when the industry thinks that this is the new normal for their business, and they will integrate it more directly from when they construct a new site.
Absolutely, and within the Institute, we're seeing that process take place now. So we're seeing processes being developed which incorporate CCS in the mainstream. Okay, the next question here relates to the ships for the full-scale projects. What kind of fuel will be used in the ships? Will they be greenhouse gas neutral?
There's definitely an ambition on that. I don't really know all the details, but definitely it's about using new technology so that you minimize emissions, definitely. So it will be a part of those designs, yes.
Okay. There is another question here just asking if the two projects are in any way competing with each other. So perhaps I'll ask Mark to respond to that initially, and then Trude, perhaps you can follow up.
No, I've been very adamant about that from the very beginning. We are not competitors. It's a shame sometimes people see that, and it's a shame sometimes perhaps you apply for funding where there's a single budget, so you seem to be competitors because you both want funding from the same budget. But these projects are both so necessary that we don't treat each other as competitors, and we're only happy to see the progress that the full-scale project in Norway is making, because it also stimulates us and shows other interested parties that it is possible to get these projects up and running. So I can't be clearer than that. No.
No, I totally agree with Mark. This is not about competing. This is about cooperating. And then we need so much of these plants. So if you look at the numbers, you just have to support everything that's happening out there. And that's what we try to do. We're cheering for each other, I think.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think there seems to be a huge amount of collaboration between different projects in Europe, and a real openness to share and work together. The next question here, are you planning CO2 pipeline infrastructure throughout the whole of Europe? I think that's an interesting question. I'll put that to you first, Mark.
No, we are ambitious, but we are not aiming at becoming a sort of a European transport infrastructure builder or company or something. No, we are starting at the port of Rotterdam, and as I said, exploring the possibilities within, let's say, about a 200-kilometer radius from Rotterdam. There's a lot of CO2 available there, but I personally don't see a sort of a completely connected CO2 infrastructure through the whole of Europe.
Okay.
I don't know about you,
well,
Trude?
I think, I think engineers can have dreams too. So why not? But I think we should take a few steps at a time, and but of course, if you are thinking of the future, and we are trying to do something that will really contribute to a decarbonized future, I think the idea of hydrogen, for instance, from natural gas with CCS is interesting, and then we could foresee at least the pipeline infrastructure in the North Sea, where we could export hydrogen and then send the CO2 back from where it came from, and sell CO2 free hydrogen. That may be a dream.
Absolutely. One final question here before I think we need to wrap up. and this relates to CO2 storage, and it's really a question: is it safe, and can we be certain that no CO2 will escape from the reservoir? So Trude, I'll ask you to respond to that initially.
The answer to that is yes, we definitely think it is safe, and we think we have proven that it's safe since we have been doing this for almost 25 years. And with the Sleipner project, we have published a lot of data, and so many research groups and universities have received data for free from seismic, for instance. So we think we have a very good understanding of what happens with CO2 once it's stored. That's very important. And the knowledge that we have from picking a good storage site and to set up the right monitoring program. So in fact, in our project, we just drilled a test well, and that was to take core samples and to do test production so that we could see that it's a reservoir 3,000 meters below the seafloor. And so it's important to do the right things so that you know that you have a good store. And we found that it's really excellent, even better than what we hoped for. So we are looking for saline aquifers where you don't have any oil and gas at all down there, and that's what we proved. So this was the first well drilled hoping not to find any oil and gas, and that is what we did. So you have to do the right things, you have to know how to do it, you need to monitor, you need to model, you need to learn from all these things. But we believe we learned that this is safe, and we will continue to follow and use that knowledge.
Excellent. And Mark, anything to add?
Well, we're building all the international knowledge, especially from the Norwegians, of course, from existing CCS projects. We believe that we have perhaps an even better layout, being storing in empty gas fields where gas has been safely guarded for millions of years. We don't know how long. And we have to abide by all these safety rules. For getting a permit, we have to deliver all these safety plans. We will monitor everything. Can we be 100% sure? No, it's still relatively new. Also the storing in the empty gas field. But are we confident that it's safe? Yes. And well, sometimes people say to me, oh, how can you're not sure whether it will be safe for 100 years or 1,000 years. And all I can say is, hey, if we don't start now, in 100 years, we'll still not be sure. I mean, it's the alternative is to blow it up in the air.
Yeah.
For now.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, excellent. Well, I think we have to move towards closure of today's session. Thank you, everyone, for your very interesting questions. And Mark, Trude, thank you so much for your responses. Before we close here, Trude, where can our audience learn a little bit more about the full-scale project?
We have a website that you are that you could visit, and please send me emails or contact us, and we can be available for answering more questions. We're happy to do so after this webinar.
Excellent. And Mark, where can our audience learn more about the Porthos project?
Yeah, on our brand new website, porthosco2.nl, Netherlands. And there's also a general email address on the website, so you can always email us with any questions. More than happy to answer them.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Trude and Mark, thank you so much for sharing your insight today, and also thank you for your leadership in helping to move CCS forwards in Europe. It's great to hear that these important projects remain on track, and we're really excited to see how these projects develop in the coming years. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A recording of today's webinar, along with recordings from our other webinars in the CCS Talks series, can be accessed through our website, www.globalccsinstitute.com. There you can also access various institute publications, such as our latest publication, The Value of Carbon Capture and Storage, and our flagship report, The Global Status of CCS. We will be continuing our CCS Talks series in the coming weeks. The next webinar will be delivered on the 25th of June, and we'll look at the drivers of current CCS projects in development. On the 9th of July, we will be delivering a webinar regarding the Alberta Carbon Trunk Line, which is the newest CCS facility to become operational. If you have questions regarding Institute membership or you'd like to discuss specific consultancy requirements, please contact us using the email addresses shown. We hope that you found today's webinar helpful. Thank you very much for joining us and have a great day. Thank you.